Today, I'll be taking you to culinary school with me for our first pastry class of the semester. Today, we are going back to basics with some choux. For individual pastry class, everyone brings in their own recipes and creates their own version of the dessert. And I am starting off by making the dough. I'm piping this into little blobs and then I'm going to set that in the freezer. While that's going on, I'm going to make my crackling. Here I am mixing my butter, sugar, and flour, and then I'm going to roll it out into a very thin sheet. And then after that, I'm going to cut out some circles and place those directly on the choux buns, and now they're ready to bake. While those are baking, let's make the filling. For the filling, I'm making a coffee and hazelnut cremant. I'm also going to make a jelly and a creme anglaise sauce. And finally, for garnish, I'm going to make some leaf tuile. Now that the choux buns are done baking, here's how they turned out. I'm just going to fill them with my coffee hazelnut filling. And here is the finished result. This is what I made today in individual pastry class. I'm Mariah, and today I'll be taking you with me for another day at culinary school. For our second semester of Higher National Diploma in Culinary Arts, we have something called theme nights, where each student is given a concept and every week a different student is in charge of one of the school's restaurants for a week. During that week, the student who has their theme night has to have planned all of the menus, the dishes, sketches, ingredients, costings, recipe cards, as well as orders, menu requisitions, and pretty much acts as the head chef for that week. Our theme nights take us months of work and preparation, and they count for our entire grade. So as you can imagine, it is pretty stressful because we want to make sure everything is perfect. This week's theme night is Asian Fusion. It is our 7th theme night this semester, which means that Laura, the student who has her theme night this week, has to create dishes that intertwine Asian and Mediterranean culture together and present them in a fine dining manner. Here is the menu for today, and I have been assigned to work on the intermediate course, which is sea bass ceviche. I'm starting off by cleaning the fish, removing the skin and picking out all of the bones. And after that, I'm going to chop up the fish and portion it into equal amounts, and I'm going to set that aside in the fridge for now. Meanwhile, I'm making the dressing, which is a ponzu sauce infused with honey. And then I'm making the squid ink emulsion, which is a fancy word for homemade mayonnaise, which is done by emulsifying eggs and oil together, as well as the squid ink, until it becomes this pipeable consistency. After that, I'm making this thing called a red cabbage veil by boiling some red cabbage in order to extract the color. and adding agar-agar and then letting it set, cutting it out to form this thin, translucent sheet of jelly. Now that all of our components are ready, it is time to plate. This is what the final result looks like for our intermediate course. Of course, this dish was created by Laura, the student who has her theme night today. And then service normally starts at around 7 p.m. and we take up to 36 bookings each day at our restaurant. And all these people would have booked weeks in advance to come and eat at our restaurants because they are so cheap in price compared to the food we serve. I mean, it is a student-run restaurant, which means you're pretty much getting high-quality food at a great price. Days like today are pretty tiring because we get to school at around 10 a.m., sometimes even earlier, depending on whose team night it is, and we leave at around 10 or 11 p.m. But it's totally worth it considering the feedback we receive on our dishes and work. And that is what a normal day looks like for me as a higher national diploma student in culinary arts during a restaurant service day.
Things you probably didn't know about culinary school. Sometimes we have days where we are at school for 12 hours straight. Most of the time we have evening classes and go home very late at night. Sometimes we work individually, but most of the time we work in teams or with partners. We learn how to do things like marketing and accounting to prepare us for when we have our own restaurant. Most kitchen and baking classes last between 4 to 6 hours. We have a ton of assignments apart from our cooking classes. You get to act as a head chef sometimes and manage your classmates and run the school restaurant. Most of the time you'll get to eat or take the food you make home with you.
Culinary school, it was my theme night, which if you saw my previous TikTok, you know that at the beginning of the year, everyone is assigned to a concept, and that meant I had to be in charge of the school's restaurant for a week. And during that week, I had to assign all of my classmates with recipes and work, and basically act as the head chef during kitchen and pastry class. My assigned concept was Asian street food, and I got to pick foods from various regions and cultures all over Asia and present them in a fine dining manner. I got to school at 8:30 a.m. today, way before everyone else, and I started preparing mochi. I made a type of mochi filled with a matcha white chocolate mousse, and then I made another type of mochi filled with a raspberry white chocolate mousse, and these are going to be for our petit fours. Next, I really wanted to practice my chocolate skills, so I made these dark chocolate bonbons filled with a black sesame dark chocolate ganache, and they turned out so good. For tarts, we made these Korean-inspired egg tarts, and then we just garnished them with some leftover berries on top. Then for petit fours, we also made these chocolate-dipped fortune cookies, as well as these Indian-inspired honey and sesame seed bites. For bread, we had Japanese milk bread, red bean steam buns, as well as naan bread. For my plated dessert, I made these traditional Chinese mooncakes filled with a cured egg yolk custard inside, and I paired it with a miso ice cream I made, as well as some honeycomb. The gâteau consists of a black sesame white chocolate base, an Earl Grey tea infused sponge, a pear and cardamom compote, which was all enclosed in a white chocolate matcha mousse, and topped with a lime and milk jelly. Then another student and I stayed for service, where we prepped the dishes a la carte, and by the time it was done, it was nearly 11 p.m. and it was time to go home. And that is what my pastry theme night looked like. Today, I'll be taking you with me to culinary school for my kitchen theme night. Instead of an exam this year at culinary school, we have theme nights where each student is given a concept and they have a week where they are in charge of the school restaurant and act as a head chef to their peers. This week, it is my theme night and I was assigned on Asian street food. Here is my menu for today, and I went ahead and assigned everyone on their dishes, and then we got to work. At 7 p.m., the guests started to come in and sit down at the restaurant, and then it was time to begin service. For my amuse-bouche, I prepared a dish inspired by gimbap, which is similar to sushi, but prepared slightly differently, and it also originates from Korea. Then, moving on to the starter, I prepared these duck bao buns topped with a soy sauce glaze. Moving on to the intermediate course, I prepared a dish inspired by mee goreng noodles. But due to a few ingredient shortages and supplier issues, we had to change it up. So here it is. Moving on to the main course. For fish, they had a choice of spicy Korean-inspired stir-fried octopus or a dish inspired by Mongolian pork stew. I'm using the word inspired a lot because I do not want to offend anyone. These dishes are inspired by other dishes, but they are not exactly the same. We do our own little twists and turns because we are graded on how well we are able to do that, as well as use the ingredients we have available. Then after the main course, the guests will move on to desserts and then petit fours. I actually showed you guys in my last TikTok exactly what I did for my pastry theme night, which was a day after this one, and then it was time to clean up and we were all done and finished by 10 p.m. And that is what my kitchen theme night looked like. Today at culinary school, I was helping out my classmate Miguel prep for his theme night when all of a sudden we had a ton of extra empanada dough left over, and so we thought, why not make a dessert out of it? So let's make some Nutella empanadas at culinary school. Here is the recipe for the dough if you want to go ahead and make that. I'm going to weigh my empanada dough into small portions, and then I'm just going to roll them into balls. Just look at how satisfying that is to do. Now I'm going to roll them out. I've never actually made these before, so please excuse the fact that I might not be doing the correct technique here. I'm using a rolling pin and just flattening the ball of dough. But now that the base is done, I'm going to take a spoon and scoop some of this generic Nutella we had in the pastry lab and just plop that in the middle and just close it up, seal those edges, and I'm just going to trim it using a metal ring. Now it's time to deep fry them. While deep frying, I was like, you know what would go really good with these? Cinnamon sugar. But unfortunately for us, we barely had any in our kitchen, so Ivan and I ran to the pastry lab to get some. We fried them for a few minutes. Now it's time to toss them in the cinnamon sugar. And now for the reveal. And there you have it. That's how we made Nutella empanadas at culinary school. Hi, I'm Mariah, and today I'll be taking you with me to culinary school for our 12th and final theme night of the year. Our final theme night is local produce, which means Ivan, the student who has his theme night today, has to create a menu using locally sourced ingredients and present them in a fine dining manner. We started off with a quick presentation where Ivan showed us his menu, assigned us to our stations, and just gave us a quick brief of what's going to happen, and then it was time to get changed, head downstairs, and start preparing. I started by placing some crackling on these shoe buns I had made a few days ago and froze prior to today, and then I'm just going to bake them until they're fully cooked. And the crackling itself is made with a local cheese known as Shpena Bilbzar or black pepper cheeselet. After that, I'm straining this combo that had been soaking in tomato water for a few days in the fridge. I'm going to reserve some of that liquid and boil it, and then I'm going to add some agar-agar to it, strain it, and pour it into a sauce bottle. Then I'm going to take my oil, cool it down until it's about -4 degrees Celsius, pour it into a bowl, and spin it around while I drip this liquid I've just made. And now we've got these beautiful tomato and combo pearls. Next, I'm making an olive gel by boiling off this olive water, adding agar-agar to it, letting it set, and then blending it until it's nice and smooth. Meanwhile, everyone had done their prep, so it was time to start setting up for service. At around 7 p.m, the guests started to come in, and it was time to begin their first course. For amuse bouche, the first one you're seeing here is a tart inspired by the Maltese ftira. And then for the other two, we had this choux bun I had prepared earlier with a Maltese sausage mousse. And then we also have this crostade inspired by a Maltese pastizzi, which is also filled with the same exact pea filling. And for starter, we have a cured mackerel served with a potato and hay emulsion, as well as pickled carrots and tomato dashi. They will also be served a ramekin with the tomato and kombu water, as well as the pearls inside. For intermediate course, we have a risotto infused with nettle puree, preserved lemon, and cooked local snails in garlic. Moving on to the palate cleanser, we have a loquat and lemon verbena sorbet, a sheep's milk and honey foam, and a chamomile tea sorbet with bee pollen. After the palate cleanser, it was time for the main course. For fish, the dish consisted of red snapper, borage puree, local prawn, fermented kohlrabi and whey sauce, as well as basil oil. For rabbit, it was served as Guerdon style, which meant the service team would cut from the roll itself and serve it to the guests. This included black and white garlic, pearl onion, carob choux, and leg and offal crostade. Finally, the meal was finished off with pre-desserts, desserts, as well as petit fours, which were all prepared by the other class. At around 11:30 p.m, we were finally done, and that is what a day in my life looks like after having survived Ivan's theme night.